So I guess you guys are kind of wondering what's going to change with the channel after the video that I did last week. By the way, I have to say gotcha to some of you guys, but nonetheless, how am I going to change the channel? What am I going to do educational wise, things of that nature? Well, first off, that's why we've got this truck here today. Now this truck, there's some really cool things about this. First off, this Blackout II paint, it's the same as one that I did just a couple of months ago. This is just an amazing color. It's really amazing in the sun, which, this being Ohio, we probably won't see again until June. But nonetheless, this Blackout II color is just phenomenal. I absolutely love it. Now, something else that you may have noticed, that grille's kind of unique. This truck, everything's just blacked out. I love the way it looks. We've got the same thing on the wheels here. It's got the fender gap fillers there for the aerodynamics and stuff. This truck, just a really cool truck. On top of that, this has the MX-13 455 horsepower. It's got the Endurant 12-speed automated transmission behind it. But that's not really what we're going to talk about today. One of the biggest things is you guys have often pushed me to learn more, to do more. And I realize that, I mean, as complex as these machines are, you can only know so much about them. So that being said, I've decided to call in an expert on something. You guys have asked some questions. Today, I'm going to take some of your questions and see if I can get some answers. See if you can tell me who we're working with.
Okay.
We ready?
We're set.
Perfect. So I mentioned experts. This is Fred. Fred's from Bendix. He's going to go over this stuff and I'm just going to get out of his way.
Okay. Well, thanks, Josh. And hi, everyone. I'm here to talk to you about the Bendix driver assistance technology that is on this T680. Now we're going to talk about the Fusion system. Fusion, or what we call Bendix Wingman Fusion, is a collision mitigation technology. What's important to remember about this is that this is a driver assistance technology, not a driver replacement technology. Your safe driving practices, your comprehensive driver training, and your good habits are going to keep you safe on the road. Wingman, like the name implies, is just there to back you up. So let's talk a little bit about what this technology is. Well, the Bendix Wingman Fusion builds on the old Bendix Wingman Advanced system. And what we utilize is a radar, which you might recall from the Bendix Wingman Advanced system, working with a camera that we have up in the window. That's what makes it Fusion. The radar and the camera work together. Now think about it. When you make a decision, isn't it better to have more than one source of information? And that's exactly what we're doing with the Bendix Wingman system. The Fusion system utilizes the radar, which sees the metallic object, camera verifies what it is. That allows us to figure out the situation sooner, give you an alert earlier, and if necessary, cut your throttle, bring on the brakes to help you mitigate that rear end collision. The Bendix Wingman Fusion system, standard on the Kenworth T680.
We came outside here to enjoy the sun that we don't have and won't get until June. So even though it's sprinkling, I've got the jacket on top of my camera, little protection. I also don't want it to get cold. But we're going to talk about some of the comments that you guys have made in the videos that I've done that has involved some of the Bendix stuff in the past. And what I want to do is, while Fred's here, I'm going to ask a couple of pointed questions that you guys fired at me that made me chew off most of my nails at my desk. And part of it is technology. We're all afraid of it. We know what happens with a piston. We know what happens with gears inside of a transmission. Magic boxes, what do they do?
Okay, well, that's a great question. And one of the things that you have to keep in mind is it's just not the technology pieces you see. This is a system, okay? And these are the sensors. And think of sensors as sight. Okay, the radar sends out a signal about 500, 550 foot, captures up to about 32 objects. One it's most concerned about is that one that's directly in front of you. That sends information that the camera then taking a look at that object says, hey, is it a car? Is it a truck? Is it a 12-pack of Coca-Cola sitting in the middle of the road? That helps verify what the radar's seeing. But these are sensors. There's an electronic control unit, think of it as a computer, that takes this information along with algorithms, figures out what's going on, and then interacts with the driver through alerts or through intervention.
So how wide? I mean, is that looking at this or is that looking at that?
Well, it's really kind of an odd shape type of thing, but it goes out, roughly about 22 degrees in terms of width and roughly about a 16-degree height type of thing. Okay. So it's a cone that's going out. And then the camera's got a wilder, it is kind of wild actually, but it's got a wider field of view, but it doesn't see out as far. It sees out, maybe about 325 foot. So the radar is going to pick up the target first, the camera is then going to pick it up, verify it, and we talked about interventions. That's when we're going to do one of two things. We'll give the driver an alert, always give the driver an alert first, because we want the driver to take over. Remember, driver assistance, not driver replacement. But if the driver doesn't, we're going to cut their throttle if necessary, and then if necessary, apply the brakes to help mitigate that front end collision they could have.
So when you say mitigate, you're meaning lessen.
Right. So you noticed I didn't say prevent. You're pretty good at that, okay? Because it's not going to prevent every crash from occurring. But if we can take energy out of the potential collision, well, maybe we turn what would have been a fatality crash maybe into just a property damage only crash, or better yet, a near miss.
So essentially, I'd rather hit something at 30 than at 70.
Well, you'd rather hit something at 5.
Right, right.
But that's the basic idea. Lower speed takes out energy, the kinetic energy that can occur in a potential collision. Okay, and that's why the technology is so important, and that's why also too, nobody sits back and says this is collision avoidance. It can't be. Okay, it's collision mitigation. We're there to help. The driver also has options too, though, because remember, we build this system on top of the full stability technology, Bendix ESP in this case.
Okay.
And so if the driver decides, hey, I'm not going to stop in time, but hey, look, my lane's clear, I can swerve to avoid, the stability technology then kicks in to help mitigate a potential rollover or loss of control.
So the big point question
yes,
that everyone tells me is it's they or their friend or a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend of a guy that they knew one time was going down the road and just it locked up and stopped dead in the freeway.
Okay.
I've heard that story a lot, and it hasn't happened to me. I do not have the miles that these guys do, but
we must know the same guys, because that friend of a friend of a friend has told me that too. So what's happening in that case? There's a couple of things, first of all, you have to keep in mind. There are systems out there that are radar-based technologies that will react to stationary objects. So what's a stationary object? That could be, a car that's stopped in the road, or it could be a large can. It might be a 12-pack of pop. It could be an overhead sign. Okay. I've heard of Mylar balloons floating in front of the truck, causing things to break. That's not the way the Bendix technology works. Okay. And what we do is, first of all, we won't brake on a stationary object with the technology where it is today. Even with our previous radar only, the Wingman Advanced, or with the Wingman Fusion system. And the reason for that is exactly that point. There is too much possibility, at least with the technology today, of capturing something that's not a vehicle. Okay. So first of all, first thing to think is, what technology are you working with? Is it Bendix or is it another? So by not braking on those, we avoid that. Now what we do is, with the Fusion system, if there's a vehicle in our lane of travel, the radar will see it first. The camera will then verify that it's a vehicle. And if it can verify it, we will then alert the driver and apply the brakes to help take energy out of the potential collision.
So it knows vehicles.
It's looking for, the camera is looking for the shape of the back of a vehicle. Now, if that vehicle is perpendicular across the road, what'll happen is the system will see the metallic. The camera can't verify that it's a vehicle, at least at this point in time, so it will alert the driver with what we call a stationary object alert, which gives the driver kind of a heads up to help them either slow or steer to avoid.
But it's, the way you say that, it's alert, it's not on the brakes.
The stationary object is an alert, okay? But if
Okay.
we do verify it's a vehicle, then we will apply stationary vehicle braking or collision mitigation braking to help mitigate the collision. We'll cut the throttle and apply the brakes, unless the driver takes over, swerves to avoid it, hits the brakes themselves, or does a combination of
So
both.
if the driver looks up, yes, this is an uh-oh moment,
Yep.
and slams on the brakes himself,
Yep.
does the system pretty well just go to stability control at that point then?
Depends on what the situation is, but
Okay.
if the driver, let's say, hits the brakes, but the system doesn't think we're applying enough brakes, we're going to add some additional braking to help.
Okay.
If the driver brakes and steers, and we feel that, hey, maybe we're losing a little stability, then we might cut throttle, or we might help him with the braking to help him make that.
So it's still
maneuver.
looking at all those sensors, though, to
Yep.
say, what can we do to get out of this?
Information into the system to help the driver mitigate the potential situation. It's going to help as much as it can, okay?
Gotcha.
But it still doesn't replace that need for the driver. You know, we're not
Right.
at autonomous trucks yet.
No.
We're not even close to autonomous
No.
trucks yet. So the driver driving safely is still important. And I like to say about the technology, it's really designed. It's not going to make a bad driver a good driver. It's going to irritate a bad driver because he's going to get alerts and interventions and might help him become a good driver, but it's going to help a good driver avoid having a really bad day. And that's really what it's designed to do.
I like how you put that. There's going to be some guys that may be offended by that. And I'm good. I'm good with that. I'm good with that. That'll keep that interesting for him. I've also get questions from guys that they deal with the speed camera on this, because this tells you if you're speeding.
Yep.
If you go too fast, what is it? I mean, if you say, hey, look, the speed limit's 60, I gotta get the hell where I'm going. What happens if you decide to a little bit further?
Okay, so what the speed sign recognition does is it utilizes the camera to actually read the speed limit sign. And so if you're going 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, system will give you an alert. If you're going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, it gives you an alert and a 1 second dethrottle. That dethrottle is kind of a haptic alert. It's not going to slow you down or anything from that perspective, but it gives you a second alert besides just the audible and visual.
The alert.
Yeah.
The audible side of that. Is there a way to turn that off? I get guys asking that all the time.
And that's a great question because I get asked it a lot as well. And it's really the OE that makes the decision as to whether there's a volume control or whether that audible alert can get turned off.
Okay.
Some OEMs will do it. Right off the top, Josh, I'm not sure if Kenworth does it.
No,
but
Kenworth doesn't. So to answer your guys' question on that, it's going to beep.
Yeah. So the point, though, is at some point, because I know all the OEMs are looking at it, Kenworth as well, because when you have that sleeper setup, you want to make sure that you're toning down the alert so you're not disturbing the guy in the back.
bunk.
So it is a good, valid question. Well, the other thing to keep in mind, too, is it's funny you bring up the point, but, there's the Smith system, which a lot of fleets and OEMs say, the more distance you keep behind that vehicle. And they go at 7 seconds, 7 to 9 seconds is their recommendation, which I can honestly say is a pretty long way. Our first alert, depending on the alert strategy for the system, is at 3 seconds. So if you're getting an alert from the Bendix system, you might want to just back it off a little bit. Give yourself a little bit of space.
It is set a little more driver-oriented than it is insurance company-oriented.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
That makes a little more sense. It's interesting, as I've hung out with more and more drivers, the guys that have the 2.5, 3 million safe miles are the ones that are not hauling through they said they never noticed.
They never get alerts. They don't hear the beeping. They don't feel the stability intervention. That's right. And it's also funny. There was a fleet. Somebody was complaining about the system always beeping, and he said it's always beep, 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 beeping. And his manager said that's because you're always going too close, or fast. Just backing it off a little bit gets rid of the alerts, get rid of interventions, and guess what? You get home for dinner that night.
So the other one that I get occasionally from guys, and this is one that just came up for me too, on-ramps. Mm-hmm. You're cruising on a freeway, minding your own business, beautiful day out, not like today. Someone just cuts right over in front of you.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about what happens, because that's collision mitigation that's coming into play. So vehicle cuts in front of you and accelerates away. Okay, they're coming on fast, and they go. System does nothing. Okay,
because it knows
it's not a threat.
It's going. It realizes that it's going away from you, and that it's accelerating.
Now, let's say you're doing 65 and, Grandma Jones comes on and she's doing 40. Well, guess what? She is now a threat. And so the system is going to alert. And if you don't add braking, or if you don't turn to avoid Grandma, it's going to cut your throttle, apply the brakes to slow you down. Okay. That's what the system will do.
Okay. So if someone's accelerating away.
Yeah, it's not going to do anything.
Okay. But if someone's ending up, if you're gaining on that person,
right,
it's going to let you know.
Yeah,
but if they're going away, okay.
And all the driver needs to do is, you've seen this, driving your car or driving your truck or what have you. Somebody comes on, you're going to back off. You should be backing off a little bit, anyways, and keeping an eye on it.
Unless you're at 6 miles an hour.
Unless, yeah.
Then you just grab a handful of air horn and you're good.
Good.
So I'm back in the office, and first thing, as you guys can see, I started to do a little more decorating. Starting to feel more like my office. I've got lights. Look at that, huh? Nonetheless, I was really glad that I was able to get, why my shirt was doing that. I was really glad that I was able to get Fred out here today. Chris came along with him also. Didn't really get to see him on camera, but Fred is one of the demo drivers for Bendix. So he's the one that gets to take a truck out, and literally they typically do this in giant parking lots, but he tries to flip the truck. And he shows how the systems help you prevent that. If you ask me, that's a pretty fun way to spend time in a truck. But nonetheless, he's extremely knowledgeable about these items, and he takes the truck everywhere, so he's experienced with the loaded truck on the road, and he knows how to use the systems. And he and I were talking. We went to lunch and thought we'd be able to finish up some other video stuff when we got back. And it's pouring rain right now, but we got talking, and we discussed that as technology improves, the one thing that seems to be missing from so many drivers and driver programs is that education. And that's what we'd really like to focus on going forward. Because when you're educated about stuff, when you have an idea of how it works, or at least the principles behind it, it becomes a tool that you can use rather than something that you have to fight. And that's what this is all about, is giving you guys the tools that you need to get the load where it needs to be and then get you home safely afterwards. I just commented on, I just responded to a comment, so I know I owe Chuck a little bit of a shout out on here. Yes, see, I told you I was going to do it. That's really all I got. I'd love to hear your guys' feedback. If you learned something from today, if you've got questions from today, by all means would love to hear it. Put it in the comments below. Make sure you're subscribed. We've got a lot of good stuff coming up here. I think next week we're going to be back to maybe a little bit more of like what we did, but with another little twist on it. So make sure you're subscribed so you can see that. Hit that notifications bell. As always, stay safe out there. Keep it rubber side down. I'm going to get to work and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.